how I almost got banned by my photo lab creating these photograms directly onto film, what you will need to make the photograms yourself at home, and how to avoid getting banned yourself, and then creative ways of processing the images from these photograms. So we're going to look at how to make these photograms. And a photogram is, in this case, where we're placing objects directly onto the film and then exposing it to light, to a light source ourselves. Okay, so this is an example of 120 film, which has had objects placed on it and then exposed. And you probably can't see it very well until I hold it up behind a light, and I will show you some close-ups. Okay, so here, with different film, get different base colors. So it's a single roll of film with a single image, which is very abstract, especially in this case, with fruit and other things laid on top of it. So I'm going to show you how to make these first. Okay, so here the first thing you need to do is take your roll of film and unspool it. I'll come back to that later, and lay it out flat on your table. And remember, you're doing this all in the dark, and put something at either end to prevent the film from curling. Okay, so you need something heavy at either end to stop it moving whilst you're working on it. Then you can place any objects you like. Here I've got some glass slides, a bit damaged, that I found at a craft show and rescued from basically a pile of junk. So anything that you like goes on the film, slices of fruit, gemstones, whatever it is. And then take a light source, any light source. I normally use my phone light, but here I'm demoing with a bigger light panel, and expose the film. Now, the exposure is purely vibe based. Better to have a bit more exposure than you perhaps think, to overexpose, then to underexpose, and then clear off the film so that it's ready to roll back up. Okay, so the hardest part of this is obviously it's all got to be done in the dark, and you need to, if you're using 35mm, get the film back in the canister. So here I've just got a fresh roll, and when you're making the photogram, you're pulling the lead all the way out. So you're pulling the film all the way out of the canister, and then once you've exposed it, you need to get the film back into the canister. So you can either just shimmy it very carefully back in, okay? So if you pull it out a bit, you can sort of push it very slowly back in, or you can use a tool to twist and wind the film back inside the canister. Okay, so actually 35mm is a bit easier than 120, because 120 has, so I've got some Phoenix 120 here, and if I open this up, it's got the paper back into it. And if you're using water or anything which has liquid like fruit slices, juices, it will get wet. Okay, so in this case, what you need to do is unfold this first bit of the film lead, and then unroll all of this out with the paper backing onto the table. And once you've then done that, expose your photogram, and then very carefully roll the film back up onto the spool. And that was the hardest with the 120 film. Having said that, the possibilities are endless. So there's a 35mm example here, which was actually really fun to do with fruit slices. So you can see, I can see two big gaps here where there are obviously fruit slices on the film. Be wary then that obviously some materials, if you put them on the film, will damage the film. So I am very roughly handling the film in this video, especially these ones which I did a few years ago now, because they have had all sorts of things put on them. This was done submerged in water, in trays of water, and then the objects placed on them. So don't expect your film to come back nice and clean from this. Okay, so don't send the film off to a film lab to get it developed unless you know the people, because your film is going to completely mess up their machines. Okay, so this example here, which I sent off to be developed and had fruit slices on. Okay, this film is completely wrecked. It's got scratches, it's had fruit and all that acidic juice on the film. Okay, so it's going to mess up the lab development. So the best thing to do is process by hand, which is what I did with the first few rolls, which were black and white. So if you would like to try this, then I suggest starting with black and white is a good place, because then you can control all the aspects of what you want to put on, how long you expose it for, your entire development of the film as well, and then scanning. And scanning I've just done with my light box and the scanning mask and the copy stand that I used to photograph fruit in the last video. Okay, so I have 5 of these rolls now, and because they are whole images, you have huge leeway on how to process and how to crop. So what I'm going to show you is what I've done with some of them through Lightroom and Photoshop. So what I will say is that the 120 film, that's sort of pretty reasonable to try and stitch together into one really long image. So I have done that. The 35mm film is just way too long to be able to stitch correctly, having exposed each individual portion um, for the same amount of time, so the same exposure when scanning, so that they can be easily stitched together. Um, there's just some parts of this are actually blank, so it just can't stitch the image together. So picking out the interesting bits, like there's one bit here which is interesting, so that I can stitch and create an image from that section, even though the whole roll is technically a photo. Okay, so this is my Lightroom catalog full of the scans from 3 of the rolls. Okay, so you can see here I've got 1 to 18, so those sort of with the bluish tints. That's one roll of 120. I think I used a roll of Portra, and the other role was Phoenix, maybe. So I think maybe this one was Phoenix. To be honest, I'm not sure. So that's another roll of 120, and then you can see the 35mm here with sprockets, and that's quite a few more images, obviously, much longer roll. So I said before that I couldn't really stitch all of these together, and some parts of the film were less uh, had less detail than others. So for instance, here, these few images, I probably wouldn't want them in the stitch anyway. So it wasn't really an option to stitch the 35mm film together into one really long image. So what you're seeing now is the same images, but converted, so inverted, using Smart Convert, and then cropped, just to get rid of any borders or any of the film sprockets. So actually here you can start to see a bit more wild patterns, textures coming through, So here in this one, I can sort of just about see uh, slice of fruit on here, and then some other fun, weird bits of the image. There looks like sort of snowflakey bits here where the red turns to black. I think that's perhaps due to reactions with the acidic juices of the fruit and the film. So this is what I was saying about if you're using liquids or something which has water inside, then just be careful. It's going to interact with your film like this did. Okay, so I converted or inverted the negatives first to get these pictures without borders, and then I made sure that they were cropped and attempted to put them together as panos. So some of these panos were just done by selecting a bunch of them and then going to photo merge and panorama, and that worked well for most of them. And then the more complex stitches, like attempting to stitch a 35mm roll, that was done through Microsoft Ice because Lightroom and Photoshop just couldn't cope with stitching such a complex um, set of images, and especially when there are a lot of them with perhaps some with very little detail to match on. So in this case, Microsoft Ice is much better at stitching together the photos than Lightroom or Photoshop could ever be. So then what I've done here is whatever I like, really. The sky is the limit. So I have cropped some of them to highlight interesting bits. I mean, you can see a whole fruit slice in this one. So you can see a whole fruit slice and how it's interacted with the film base, and you can sort of make out a few of the wedges. So that has come from a whole pano. So it's this pano up here. Okay, so that was the whole roll of film inverted and stitched together. So I think that's kind of cool. You can identify some of the fruit. So that's on either an orange or a lemon slice in the middle. It looks like on the left you've got kiwi slices, so of all the little seeds there in the middle. And then you've got all of this funky interaction with the liquids and the film. So this is an abstract delight. I love abstract images, and this is just such a fun thing to do. You can do whatever you like with these images now that you've processed and inverted them. So there's a few here which came out really red. They look like the surface of the sun, especially this one down here. Let me just highlight that one. So the sky's the limit, really. I've used fruit slices, vegetable slices. I've submerged the film in water, put little fake diamonds and pieces on, like the image that you see on the screen. Here are a few of the whole panoramas of the rolls. The top one is part of the 35mm color roll, and the bottom is the 120. Here again with some diamonds and bits of fruit and fruit seeds. There are a piece of fruit on the 35mm black and white. And these are also black and white, but colorized afterwards in Lightroom. And you can just see some of the cool patterns that you get out of this sort of image. Okay, so I hope you are inspired to try something new. Maybe try making photograms directly onto your film with whatever objects you desire, really, and just see what crazy outcome you get. Develop it yourself so that you don't get banned by a film lab. See you next time.